I think he emerges as somebody who was not just an idealist in terms of theory, but was also in some ways quite naive. He's somebody who comes from a rather professorial atmosphere. When he gets to Washington, things have a way of going wrong. And his ending up as Richard Nixon's national security advisor is kind of unexpected. It's a bit of a surprise to him.
So if he had loftier goals as national security advisor, what were they then?
Well, I think if you were in that situation in 1969, your number one objective was to avoid World War III. And we should always remember that the risk of a Third World War was really quite significant in the Cold War. Number two, get the United States out of this mess in Vietnam. How do you do that? You have to negotiate. How do you get the North Vietnamese to negotiate? You clearly have to use some force, because at this point, they're not blinking. And in order to achieve that, then you have to do this most extraordinary of diplomatic moves, which is the opening to China, Nixon's arrival in Beijing in 1972.
Did you set out to be a contrarian? I mean, you know, this is a man who is hated by so many people because of Vietnam, because of the bombing of Cambodia. They call him a war criminal and so on. Did you set out to bust that?
No, I mean, I initially thought the first volume would be called American Machiavelli. My hypothesis was that he was the arch-realist. It was only as I started to read through the early letters and the journals, when I started to read about his experience as a soldier in World War II, his experience of confronting the Holocaust in Germany in 1945, his early writings, his struggle, really, with philosophical and historical questions, that I began to realise this is not the man I've been led to expect at all.
Do you think we have the same approach to international relations and politics now with our current generation of politicians? I mean, is statecraft even a thing in the modern world?
I think yes and no. No, I don't think there's great understanding of statecraft as Kissinger defined it, historically based, strategically sophisticated. I'm very struck by how today's decision makers really aren't that well historically informed. Imagine a president who tolerated the overthrow of a democratically elected president, tolerated mass executions of that democratically elected government, it restored military aid to that country. Imagine such a president. It's not just Richard Nixon in the case of Chile, it's also Barack Obama in the case of Egypt today.
Do you think the strategy is discernible at all in the way that it perhaps was? It was much clearer, in a way, in Cold War terms, wasn't it?
I think there was much more strategic clarity. It was something that Kissinger pressed for, and it was something that Nixon recognised was necessary. And I certainly think that they had a grand design at the beginning of 1969. It evolved over time. I struggle a bit to see what the strategic design of the Obama administration has been, other than not to be George W. Bush's administration. And this concept of strategic patience, which Susan Rice, Kissinger's successor as National Security Advisor, has used, seems to me like a fancy way of saying, play for time, kick the can down the road, hope things will be OK. And it's not worked well in Syria, let's put it mildly.
You haven't got to the bombing of Cambodia in this volume, that comes in the next book, but is there anything to learn, do you think, about military action, bombing people to the table, when it comes to Syria, from what happened there?
Well, I think there's a general lesson, which is not specific to the Nixon administration, that air power can only get you so far. We haven't really made great progress in containing extremist Islamism. So I think air power in Syria, and perhaps also if one thinks of Pakistan and Afghanistan, is not really achieving terribly much, though it's killing people. And this seems to be a reminder that if you are trying to fight the kind of war that I think has to be fought to contain those sorts of extremist groups like Islamic State, ultimately you will need to put boots on the ground, to use the cliche. You need the intelligence that's only available on the ground. You cannot do everything from the air. I thought we learnt this in the 1990s, but it seems like we forgot it all over again because of the trauma of Iraq.